You're my father. I'm sorry, he said, his voice controlled and deep. Do I know you? Maya swallowed hard. My name is Maya William. My mother's name is Loretta William. You knew her. There was the faintest shift in his gaze, something flickering behind the composure, but he quickly masked it with a faint, dismissive smile. I think you're mistaken. I'm not mistaken. Her hand trembled as she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a creased photograph. This is you, isn't it? She slid it onto the table. Charles's hand hovered above the photo before he picked it up. It was a picture of a younger him, no more than 35, standing with a radiant Loretta William at a charity gala. Her mother's arm was looped through his, her smile wide. His expression once unguarded for the first time since she'd approached. Charles's face changed. His lips parted slightly, his eyes locked on the image as if it had been plucked straight from a memory he'd buried deep. Before he could speak, a sharp voice cut through the moment. Maya, what the hell do you think you're doing? Robert, the restaurant manager, stormed toward them. His face twisted in a scowl. He stepped right between her and Charles. You think you can just walk up to a guest, one of our most important guests, and pull some little stunt for attention? Is this about money? Is that it? It's not about money, Maya shot back, her voice steady. It's about the truth. Robert's eyes narrowed. The truth? The truth is you're a waitress here and you serve tables. You don't harass customers with your sob stories. His tone dripped with venom. And then before she could move, his hand cracked across her cheek. The slap echoed against the polished walls, drawing startled glances from nearby tables. Her face burned, but the sting was nothing compared to the surge of humiliation and rage. You don't get to put your hands on me, she said. Her voice trembling now, not from fear, but from fury. Robert turned to Charles, his tone instantly changing into syrupy apology. Mr. Whitmore, I am so sorry for this scene. She'll be removed immediately. He grabbed her arm and began to pull her toward the service corridor. Stop. The single word, low and firm, froze Robert mid-step. Charles's eyes were still on the photograph, but now his expression was harder to read. Let her go. Robert released her reluctantly. Sir, with all due respect, Charles interrupted. I'd like Miss William to sit down here at my table. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Robert's mouth opened and closed like he was about to protest, but Charles's gaze silenced him. Without another word, Robert stalked away, muttering under his breath. Maya hesitated, her cheek still throbbed, her pulse still raced. You really want me to sit here? Charles gestured to the chair across from him. Yes, I think we should talk. She slid into the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The waiter returned nervously, taking an order Charles barely glanced at. For several minutes, they spoke in low tones. Questions from Maya, guarded answers from Charles, the photo lying between them like an unspoken truth. Finally, Charles sat down his fork. If we're going to have this conversation, I want to do it properly. Where's your mother now? Maya's heart thudded. She's at home in Queens. Charles leaned back, his jaw tightening. Let's go see her. The car ride was silent. Maya stared out the window as the city blurred by, her mind spinning with what-ifs. When they pulled up to the modest brick apartment building, she led him up the narrow staircase to the second floor. Her mother answered the door in a faded cardigan, her hair wrapped in a scarf. At first, she didn't notice him. Her eyes were on Maya. Baby, you're home early. Then she looked past her daughter and froze. For a long moment, neither spoke. Loretta's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening as if she were seeing a ghost. Charles's expression softened in a way Mia hadn't thought possible. Loretta, he said quietly. Her mother's voice broke. Charles. After all these years, Mia stood between them, her heart pounding, knowing the night had only just begun and that whatever happened next would change everything she thought she knew. For a few seconds, the doorway held 3 decades of unspoken history. The air felt thick enough to touch. Maya glanced from her mother to Charles, trying to read the expressions that flitted across their faces. Shock, hesitation, and something deeper that might have been regret. Loretta was the first to move. She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," she said, her voice tight. No point standing in the hall. The apartment was small, but warm, filled with the scent of cinnamon and coffee. A well-worn sofa faced a television that looked like it had been around since the late 90s. Family photos lined the shelves. Pictures of Maya at various ages. Smiling at birthdays, school events, graduations. None of them included a father. Charles stepped inside cautiously, as though he was walking into a memory he wasn't sure he had permission to revisit. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on the photos before settling on Loretta again. "You haven't changed much," he said quietly. Loretta let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's a lie, Charles. We've both changed. The years don't skip anyone." Maya moved toward the sofa, unsure whether she should sit or stand. Her cheeks still burned from Robert's slap, though she'd stopped thinking about it during the ride over. Now the reality of what was happening sank in. Two people she'd only ever pictured in separate worlds, now standing face to face in her mother's living room. "You two know each other," Maya said. More a statement than a question. Loretta's gaze didn't leave Charles. "Yes, we do." Charles cleared his throat. "Your mother and I met a long time ago. I was younger, stupid, and in love." "Oh, in love." Loretta's eyes flashed. "You call it that? You let your father decide who you could marry, who you could be seen with." "I was never good enough for the Whitmore name." Charles's jaw tightened. "It wasn't just my father. It was the world I lived in back then. I let fear dictate my choices. And I've regretted it ever since." Maya crossed her arms. "You regret it so much you never once tried to find me, to see me, not even a birthday card." He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "I didn't know you existed until much later. By then I told myself it was too late. That I'd only caused trouble." "That's not your decision to make," Maya said, her voice sharp. "You made it for both of us." Loretta stepped into the kitchen, returning with 3 mugs of coffee. She set them on the table with a clink that broke the tension just enough for everyone to sit. Maya and her mother sat on the sofa. Charles chose the armchair opposite them. He took a sip before speaking again. "I don't expect forgiveness. I came here tonight because when you showed me that photo, Maya, I realized how much of my life I've spent hiding from the truth and how much damage that hiding has done." Maya wanted to believe him, but her skepticism was a shield she'd learned to carry. "You didn't come to me. I came to you. In your world, I'm just the waitress who made a scene." "Not anymore," Charles said. "Now you're my daughter. That changes things." Loretta shook her head. "It should have changed things 29 years ago." The words hung in the air. Maya stared into her coffee, tracing the rim of the mug with her finger. "So, what happens now? You invite me to a couple of dinners, maybe write me into your will, or is this just another thing you can check off your conscience?" Charles set his mug down. "You deserve to know the truth about who I am and where you come from. Not just my name, everything. My family history, the good and the bad. And if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of your life now." "Your family doesn't even know I exist," Maya said. "That's going to change," he replied. "It won't be easy, but I'm not running from it this time." Loretta leaned back, crossing her arms. "You think you can just walk back in here and make promises? You have no idea what she's been through. I raised her without a penny from you. I was the one there for every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every time she asked me why she didn't have a dad like other kids." "I know," Charles said softly. "And I'll always be grateful for that. But I can't undo the past. All I can do is be here now." Maya looked at him for a long moment. The image of him in the restaurant, untouchable, confident, was so different from the man sitting here now. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes tired. She wondered if this was the real Charles Whitmore, stripped of the armor, wealth, and reputation provided. Finally, she spoke. I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no. But if we're going to do this, you need to understand. I'm not going to be your hidden secret. Not again. A small smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. Fair enough. The sound of a siren drifted through the window, fading into the distance. Loretta got up and cleared the empty mugs, her movements brisk. It's late, she said. We should all get some rest. Charles stood. Thank you for letting me in, Loretta. She didn't answer, just gave a short nod. At the door, Charles turned to Maya. I'll call you tomorrow. There's more we need to talk about. Mia hesitated, then gave a brief nod. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt smaller somehow, the air heavier. Her mother sat beside her on the sofa. Be careful with him, baby. Men like Charles, they don't always know how to love without conditions. I know, Maya said quietly. But deep inside, the ember of curiosity that had burned all her life was now aflame. For better or worse, she needed to see where it would lead. The next morning, Mia woke earlier than usual. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, painting pale stripes across her bed. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, replaying last night in her mind. Charles at the door, her mother's face going still. The tension that seemed to stretch from the past straight into the present. She wasn't sure if it had actually happened or if her brain had stitched together fragments of long-held dreams and unanswered questions. The smell of coffee drifted in from the kitchen. She padded out in a worn t-shirt and sweatpants to find her mother sitting at the table. A newspaper folded in front of her. Loretta looked up briefly, her expression unreadable. Morning. Morning. Maya said, pouring herself a cup. They sat in silence for a few sips before Loretta spoke again. You sure you know what you're doing? Mia leaned against the counter. No. But I know what I'm not doing. Letting him disappear again without answers. Loretta sighed. Men like Charles, they have whole worlds built around them. Money, influence, people who will protect them from anything that threatens their image. You walk into that world. You're not going in as an equal. Maya set her mug down a little harder than she intended. I'm not asking for his world. I just want the truth. And maybe for him to acknowledge that I exist. Before Loretta could respond, Ma's phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Maya. Charles's voice came through deep and steady. I was hoping we could meet today. Lunch? My office? She almost laughed at the formality. Your office? Yes. There are things I'd like to show you, things that might help you understand. She glanced at her mother, who was watching closely. Fine. Text me the address. 2 hours later, she stood in front of a glass tower on Fifth Avenue. The Whitmore building loomed above her, all sleek steel and mirrored windows. A doorman in a navy uniform opened the door with a polite nod, and a receptionist in a crisp suit escorted her to a private elevator. The ride to the top floor was smooth and silent, but her heart wasn't. She stepped out into a wide office lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Charles stood near a massive desk, a folder in his hand. You came, he said. You asked, she replied, crossing her arms. He gestured to a pair of leather chairs near the window. Sit, please. Truncated 89,813 characters, T rung and pulling herself up with everything she had. The men shouted, boots pounding the floor below, but she was already scrambling into the dark, narrow space above. The crawl space was stifling, lit only by occasional slits of yellow from the lights below. She could feel the vibrations of footsteps through the metal grates beneath her knees. Somewhere to her left, a vent rattled under impact. They were trying to find another way up. Maya, where are you? Charles's voice cut through the static. Maintenance crawl space. Maybe one floor above you, she whispered, her breath ragged. They've got at least 4 guys down here. We're on 7, Charles replied. If you can make it to the west side, there's a fire door we can use to pull you out. Maya crawled as quickly as the cramped space allowed, ignoring the ache in her knees and the sweat slicking her palms. She kept her focus on the faint rectangle of light ahead. But just as she reached it, a shadow shifted across the opening. One of the men had gotten ahead of her. "Nowhere to go, sweetheart," he said, his voice muffled by the vent cover. Ma's gaze flicked to the wrench clipped to her belt left over from her shift earlier that week. She pulled it free and swung hard at the vent bolts. The clang echoed like a gunshot. The man cursed and stepped back, but the cover held. She swung again harder until the vent popped loose. Without waiting, she shoved it outward and dropped through. She landed in a storage room piled high with crates. The fall jarred her knees, but she pushed forward, weaving through the narrow aisles toward the door. The lock clicked open from the other side and Charles stepped in. Daniel right behind him. "Move," Charles said, gripping her arm. "We've got about 30 seconds before they regroup." The 3 of them burst into the main service hallway and headed for the west fire exit. As they neared it, Maria's voice came through Charles's phone. "I'm outside in the alley with the car. Door should open onto your right." They hit the crash bar and the door flew open to a blast of cold night air. Maria's sedan was idling a few feet away. Headlights off. They dove inside. Daniel slamming the door shut just as 2 men appeared at the alley's far end. Maria floored it. Tires skidding on wet pavement before catching traction. For the first few blocks, no one spoke. The sound of the engine and the hiss of wet roads filled the silence. Finally, Maya turned to Charles. "Tell me you got the recording out." He nodded. "It's already backed up to 3 secure drives. Evelyn's words are safe." "Even if we're not," Daniel glanced over his shoulder. "She won't take this lying down. That little confession. She'll realize within the hour how much trouble it is for her, which means we use the time we've got." Maya said, "We take it to someone who can act on it before she can buy her way out." Maria kept her eyes on the road. "I know a federal prosecutor who's been after Aegis for years. She's clean and she hates the Whiters. If we get this to her, she might actually move on it." "Where?" Charles asked. Maria hesitated. "Brooklyn Heights, but she won't meet at her office. It's too exposed. There's an old church she uses for quiet talks. No cameras, no mics." Maya met Charles's eyes in the dim light of the dashboard. "Then that's where we go tonight." Maria took a winding route through the city, doubling back twice to be sure they weren't followed. When they finally pulled up in front of the church, it looked almost abandoned. Its stone walls streaked with age. The wooden doors weathered but sturdy. A single light glowed faintly in the vestibule. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of candle wax. A tall woman in a dark overcoat stepped from the shadows between the pews. Her hair streaked with gray, her eyes sharp. "Maria," she said before looking to Maya. "You must be the one who started this storm." Maya nodded. "And you're the one who can finish it." They moved to a side chapel where Maria placed a small recorder on the altar. "Evelyn Whitmore," Maria said, speaking openly about using Samuel Corbeau to move illegal shipments and about making this investigation disappear. The prosecutor listened in silence, her face unreadable. "When it ended," she said, "this is enough to open a case, but it's also enough to get you all killed before it sees trial. I'll need you in protective custody." "That's not an option," Maya said firmly. "We have more to do, more pieces to tie together." The woman studied her for a long moment. "Then you'd better move fast because once I start pulling on this thread, they'll know it's me and they'll come for all of us." Maya felt the weight of those words settle in her chest. She'd been running for weeks, fighting for inches. Now they had a foothold, but it came with a price. As they left the church, the wind off the East River cut through their coats. Somewhere in the dark, a black sedan idled at the far corner, its tail lights glowing faintly before it rolled away. Maya didn't need to see the faces inside to know whose side they were on. The game had changed again. The question was whether they had enough time to survive the next move. The sun hadn't yet risen when Maya sat at Maria's kitchen table. A steaming mug of coffee cupped between her hands. Her eyes were tired, but her mind was razor-sharp, tracing every thread of the web they'd uncovered. The prosecutor's warning still echoed in her head. Once I start pulling on this thread, they'll come for all of us. That meant today was their last day to act before the enemy locked everything down. Charles entered from the living room, his voice low. The prosecutor called. She's already drafted the subpoenas for Whitmore Holdings and Aegis International. By noon, Corbeau's name will be on a federal watch list. Maya nodded, but she wasn't smiling. That's good, but it's not enough. Evelyn will use every contact she has to stall this in court. She needs to be cornered publicly with nowhere to run. Daniel, leaning against the counter, crossed his arms. So, how do we make that happen? Maya set her mug down and looked at each of them in turn. We go live. Not an article, not a leak to one outlet, every major broadcast and streaming channel at once. We release the confession, the documents, the shipping manifests, everything. No one can bury it if the whole world has already seen it. Maria's brow furrowed. That's going to take serious coordination. And once it's out there, we'll all have targets on our backs the size of city buses. We already do, Maya said. This just means we get to pick the battlefield. By 8 a.m., Maria was on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as she tapped into a network of sympathetic journalists, activists, and whistleblower groups. Charles made calls to trusted contacts in media who owed him favors, carefully avoiding anyone with ties to the Whiters. Daniel handled logistics, setting up mirrored servers, encrypted transfer links, and a contingency plan in case they were cut off mid-broadcast. At 10:15 a.m., Mia's phone buzzed. It was the prosecutor. They know, she said without preamble. Evelyn just withdrew $10 million in cash from an offshore account. That's not defense money. That's run money. You've got hours at best before she vanishes. Then we move now, Maya said. They settled on a time. 11 a.m. Maria would push the files to the network and a dozen prearranged contacts would blast them out. Simultaneously, video segments were pre-edited to include Evelyn's damning remarks intercut with images of the poison river, sick children, and the missing trucks. Every name, date, and document was cross-referenced on screen. At 10:55, the tension in the room was electric. Maria's finger hovered over the enter key. Charles watched the clock. Daniel stood at the window, scanning the street below. 3 minutes, Charles murmured. That's when Daniel's voice cut through the room like a blade. We've got company. Maya joined him at the window. 2 black SUVs had pulled up to the curb, their windows dark, engines running. 4 men stepped out of each, moving with grim purpose toward the building's entrance. They're not here to talk, Daniel said. Maria looked up, alarmed. We're out of time. Do it, Maya ordered. Maria slammed her finger onto the key. The files launched into the network, progress bars racing across her screen. It's moving, she said. We've got connections to London, Sydney, Nairobi, hell, even a pirate radio station in Detroit. They can't stop it now. A loud crash echoed from the stairwell door. Charles grabbed a heavy chair and wedged it under the apartment's front door handle. We need a back exit now. Daniel led them toward the fire escape, but the moment they stepped onto it, a shout rang out from below. More men waiting in the alley. Back inside, Maya yelled. The pounding at the front door grew louder, the frame starting to splinter. Maria glanced at her screen. Uploads at 87%. Just a few more seconds. The door gave way with a deafening crack. The first man through didn't even see Charles swing the chair, which splintered against his shoulder, sending him sprawling. 2 more rushed in. Daniel tackled one, driving him into the wall. Maya grabbed the second by the arm, twisting until he dropped the taser in his hand. 95%, Maria shouted over the chaos. One of the attackers lunged for her laptop. But Maya intercepted him, slamming her palm into his chin and sending him staggering back. Charles shoved the table against the doorway to buy them another moment. Done, Maria screamed. It's out. The men seemed to realize it at the same time. One shouted into a radio. She's burned it. Pull back. Just as quickly as they'd come, they retreated, leaving the apartment wrecked and silent, except for the sound of Maya's pounding heart. Maria turned her laptop to face them. Every major news outlet's feed now carried the same headline. Whistleblower exposes Whitmore Holdings in global dumping scandal. Evelyn's face froze mid-smirk, her voice saying, "Samuel is efficient. He knows how to make things disappear." The words were followed by images of the damage their operations had caused. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt the weight on her chest ease just a little. "It's done," she said quietly. Charles shook his head. "No. It started. Evelyn won't just disappear now. She'll fight and she'll be angrier than ever." The prosecutor called an hour later. "You've just forced my hand. I'm issuing warrants as we speak. The FBI is already moving on Corbo. Evelyn's name is all over the evening news. She can't hide now." That night, the city seemed different. The rain had stopped and the streets hummed with a kind of restless energy. Maya stood by the window, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. She knew it wasn't over. Not until Evelyn and every one of her allies faced real justice. But for now, the truth was out. And sometimes that was the first and most important victory. She turned back to the room where Charles, Maria, and Daniel sat together, bruised but unbroken. "We've come this far," she said. "Now we finish it." And as the clock ticked toward midnight, Maya felt something she hadn't in a long time: resolve. Sharper than fear, stronger than doubt. Whatever came next, she was ready. The story of Maya's fight against the Whitmore Empire is a reminder that truth is a force far stronger than fear. It shows us that power, wealth, and influence can silence individuals, but only if those individuals allow themselves to be silenced. Maya's courage to stand her ground even when the odds were stacked against her reflects a truth we often forget. Justice doesn't happen in silence. It demands voices willing to speak even when trembling. It also reminds us that evil rarely hides in the shadows. It often walks in daylight, dressed in respectability and influence. The real battle is not just exposing the wrongdoing, but ensuring the public can no longer look away. And perhaps the most important lesson: courage is contagious. One act of defiance can ignite others, turning fear into action and isolation into unity. In the end, the fight for justice isn't about winning a single battle. It's about refusing to let injustice go unanswered. No matter how powerful the opposition, the truth will always find its way if there is someone brave enough to carry it forward. Brought to you by BUP Stories.